Hello, Vexverse, and welcome to Robot Mesh. This is our inaugural episode with the new VEX V5. My name is Chris Schultz, and my lovely assistant is
Rick Tyler, and we're going to take apart this V5 system bundle for you and show you what comes in the box and give you some highlights about what the products do.
So Rick, tell me, how long in the making was the V5 since the last release? If I understand things correctly, the VEX EDR Cortex was its predecessor. How many years ago was that release?
It was announced in probably 2009, 2010, and the first competition year with the new controller was 2010 and 11. So the Cortex is almost 10 years old. It's been around a while.
And what are the expectations in the community for the types of things that this new VEX V5 can do that its predecessor rather couldn't do?
Well, it's basically bigger, faster, and smarter. And in fact, we have this is one of the old guys. If you want to, this is a Cortex controller. I'm sure many of you in the VEX world have used these before, and you'll be impressed with the new one.
All right, so without further ado, let's pull out a knife and open up this bad boy.
Because there's been quite enough ado.
Yes.
So it's always interesting when you get a box, figuring out the best way to unpack the box. But in this case, they've even put little white arrows pointing to the tape, reminding you have to remove the tape. So we'll use our
safety first. Don't cut yourself.
Use our utility knife here. Yes, and I'm closing my utility knife. My old Boy Scout leader would be proud of me. So this is what you see when you open the box. Ta-da! Ta-da! And this is supposed to be down here. It looks like it drifted in shipping. So there you go. There's the V5 components for you.
So, as a quick run through here, what are the parts that are in this box here? I'm seeing a couple of things. Maybe you can walk us through, starting with the controller, and maybe we can talk about how it's different from the old Cortex controller.
Sure. Well, in the Cortex world, you would have called this a joystick, but now it's called a controller. Interestingly, this matches the terminology in the VEX IQ world. So if you're moving up from VEX IQ to VRC, you'll have the right names memorized already. So this, compared to the old one, you'll notice that the new one has an LCD display on it, and ultimately this will be a programmable display where you can program information coming from your robot. Other than that, it has pretty much the same buttons as the old one does, and two controller knobs and 8 buttons on the top and 4 buttons on the back.
And battery-wise, I think things are a little bit different in terms of how this thing is powered, isn't it?
Sure. There's actually 2 things that you'll like if you've been around for a while. First of all is that instead of AAA rechargeable batteries where you have to remove the screw to get the batteries out, this just has a micro USB port. So basically you charge it with a cell phone charger.
Awesome.
And it's pretty simple, and they're all over the place. The other major difference you'll notice on the back, if you turn that over, lovely Chris.
All right.
Well, you can't see here, but that's where the VEXNet key would be. No more VEXNet keys. Yay, it's got a built-in radio, so you don't have to worry about pulling VEXNet keys out or swapping them or downloading firmware to them. They're gone. So that's our new,
wonderful.
That's the new controller.
All righty.
And other things you get in the box, we'll save the brain for last. Let's build up here.
Let's build up to the brain.
Okay, so here's the new battery. And
tell me about how this compares to the old battery here. This looks substantially larger.
For one thing, the wire isn't pulled out of the new battery. But unlike the old battery, the new battery, first of all, that's a major improvement, is that instead of having built-in wires that can get torn off, it comes with removable battery cables. And right now there's just this one length of cable, but VEX has already said they plan to offer this cable in longer lengths. The other thing that's really cool about this is that when you charge the battery, rather than pulling the battery off your robot and putting it on a charger, they give you a charger, which I have another one off the side here. You just plug it in and you can charge the battery on your robot if you want to. So there you go. And when you're done charging, it has a handy button. You can push the button down and see this has got 3 out of 4 green dots, so it's mostly charged up.
So we would say this is a smart battery, and what I'm holding here is a dumb battery. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, what's actually funny is that this has a computer in it, and when you update firmware on all your other devices, you have to update your battery firmware too. But the great thing is, we'll show you, the brain handles that for you. You don't even have to worry about updates. The only thing you do have to worry about is some people have already found that their batteries weren't charging properly, and there's a teeny tiny little hole on the front here where you can stick a paper clip in to give it a hard reset. And I just love it. It reboots the brain on the battery. So that's the new battery. They're a little more expensive than the old batteries, but I think they'll be worth it. I think they're a lot better. Also, it's different technology. The old batteries were nickel metal hydride. These are lithium iron. I'll turn it right side up so the VEX shows. Lithium iron is the same technology that's used in RC cars.
Oh, cool.
And unlike lithium ion batteries, which they use like in cell phones and notebook computers, lithium iron does not catch on fire if you overheat it. So
Good to
it
know.
was chosen because it's a safer technology for
Wouldn't
VEX
want to
robots.
have the plane explode on the way to Worlds, would we?
No, this would be a bad thing. Have we? I don't know if any VEX team has done that yet, but some people have thought of it.
Okay.
This is you'll love this. The charger is just a little wall wart charger for the battery, so pretty simple.
And I'm seeing a radio here. Is this also in the box? Yes.
Yeah, and actually I'm really excited because this radio is a little thicker than a VEXNet key, but it's not much bigger. On the back it has 2 screw holes, so you can just put 2 screws through a piece of VEX metal and your radio's attached. The other cool thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that you notice nothing has wires hanging out of it. They all have these plug-in wire connectors, and we'll show you the smart wires here in just a sec. So the radio replaces the VEXNet key, and in the controller, you don't need it because it has one built in.
Excellent. Okay, next. What do we have here? It looks like some printed material. Is there anything underneath that document?
Quick start guide. Well, like everybody else in the computer world, when you get a quick start guide, you just do like that because nobody ever reads them.
Awesome.
So it is actually, I shouldn't do that.
You mean there's
That's
actually
not
useful
fair.
information in
There
there?
is useful information in there. It's a lot of pictures about how things plug together and how you put things in. So but not much text. So
Good. So you don't actually need to know how to read to look at the quick start
No.
guide. No. Okay, good.
remember,
Yeah,
I've
I
got
hate
the
reading.
blade out. Don't get too close.
Okay.
So we'll take a look. We're going to go through the cable package that it comes with, and showing that we're really going through this with you. None of these are open already. We have to open them up for you.
It's completely unscripted.
Completely unscripted, as if you couldn't tell. In fact, we wanted to welcome Chris to the United States. He's been here a month now.
Rick's just trying to get me to say it out. But yes, I'm from the snowy confines of Canada. Yes.
Yes, we're very glad to have him on board. So the key wiring element for the new world is these things, which are called smart cables. These are not RJ45 Ethernet cables. These are RJ11. Those of you that are as old as me, and perhaps Chris, can remember back when telephones had handset cables that went from the handset down to the telephone. Are you old enough to remember those?
What's a telephone?
Yeah, that's just it. Nobody knows. Here, let me see if I can plug this into my phone. No, it doesn't work. No, this is the same size connector they use in old telephones. So everything in the VEX world now plugs together with smart cables. So there's the radio with the smart cable attached. And let's see if, and the motors would all attach with smart cables. Everything goes on with smart cables. The only thing different is the battery connector, obviously, for obvious reasons, and then the battery power cable is not the same. So I guess we've talked about everything.
Built up a lot of hype here.
A lot of hype for
the
really
V5, the big
the
brain.
really big brain.
Yes.
Yeah, the big brain. So the
You're a bit of a hype beast, Rick. You had me
I'm gonna-
excited for this
I'm gonna
unboxing all day.
rip off the thing, and then it's interesting. It's got a one of the things they've added is because it's got a touch screen on it. They're worried about protecting the touch screen. They now have this. More documentation. They have this protective cover that it has a protective film on it that is not removable by human beings. There we go. There are actually 4 magnets inside the case, and these have 4 little pieces of metal, so when you put this on here, it gets held on
I heard that click, so you know it's on.
magnets. I know.
Snap.
Yeah, I understand. So that's to protect us. So what I suggest and what we do around here is for development work, we just leave it like this. But if I was going into competition, you put that on there, it keeps things from smashing in your screen.
Excellent. So I'm seeing some different things here from the old EDR Cortex. We see the smart ports, but can you tell me a little bit about legacy support on this current brain? I have with me a touch sensor here.
Sure. So let's just walk around the ports here, because as Chris said, these are the smart ports, and you get 20 smart ports on the top, and don't forget, there's a 21st smart port on the end. So you actually get 21 smart ports. And do you remember what plugs into smart ports?
No, tell me.
Okay, I will. The new V5 motors plug into here. The new sensors that come out, the new vision sensor will plug into here, and the radio plugs in. So everything can be plugged in, and it's like magic. When you plug in a radio into a port on the smart sensor, the software knows what's plugged in and what port it's plugged into. Now, this doesn't get you off the hook, programmers, because you still have to know that even if you know, the brain knows there's a radio plugged into port 15, well, the radio is a bad example. Let's say there was a motor plugged into port 15. You still have to write code to make the motor do something. It doesn't just magically work because it knows it's plugged in there.
Perhaps in the next version of the VEX robot.
Maybe the VEX version of that, and then the programmers will have nothing to do anymore. So Chris mentioned the legacy ports. So these are the primary ports for the new V5 stuff, but you have a lot of gear that's not V5, that's Cortex era. On the end of it, there's what VEX is calling the 3-wire ports. And what that allows you to do is, like the bumper switch Chris handed me, you can plug 3-wire port things into these cables, into the connectors on the end. The good thing is that you can reuse your sensors. All of the VEX sensors, I think with the exception of maybe the gyro, will work in these new ports. The good side is compatibility. The bad side is don't really think about plugging motors into here. A 393 motor, you can plug a Model 29 motor controller in here and then plug that into an old 393 motor. But all 8 of these ports share a single 2-amp power supply, and instead of 7.5 volts, they're now 5 volts. So your motors won't run as fast, and we've experimented here.
Yes.
We built a small robot with 4 drive wheels and plugged in 4 393 motors, and it ran for about 3 seconds, and then it died. So generally speaking,
Not really worth the hassle.
not really worth it. It's great for sensors, not so much for motors.
Excellent. So in terms of...
At the other, I'm sorry, do we want to do the other end?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the ports on the other end. There's the battery connector, which goes from here to the battery. And by the way, the battery, I'm going to nerd out here, but the old VEX batteries,
Ta-da.
and I love it, Chris has them, use these Tamiya RC car style connectors used for low-end radio control applications. They now use a connector that's similar to what you find in automotive usage. So that looks like a Molex connector because it is from Molex. It is a Molex connector like they use to put cars together.
Cool.
Next to that is a micro USB slot. This is what you'll use. And Chris is about to show us a micro USB cable. It also comes with a cable too, but we have one here.
This is just a garden variety
This is
USB
one that's
cable.
prettier. It's a micro on one end and a USB-A on the other end. And I was putting it upside down. There we go. Well, obviously I need to have better dexterity. Yeah, let's just throw that one away.
Okay.
Sorry. That was good.
Did I land?
You took it,
Okay.
took it to heart. Yeah, no, I think it worked fine. Yeah, let's get the factory one here. I don't know. We have used, by the way, we've used that cable you just saw go over Chris's shoulder. We've used that on a V5 robot before.
And it just really gives us a little more space to work with. It's longer cable.
There you go. The other thing we did is, so there, and then this will plug into your computer for downloading code. So one of the things that's available now is you can download code through the USB cable. The eventual plan is that you'll be able to download stuff wirelessly because this also supports Bluetooth. Unfortunately, the software that supports the Bluetooth doesn't exist yet, so it's not a feature that we can do today as we record this in September of 2018. Next to the USB port is a micro SD card slot, so you can
Even more memories.
you remember? Because this thing's a memory monster. So the old Cortex had, I believe, about 128K of user RAM. That's 128,000 bytes of user
Wait,
RAM.
are we talking about a computer from the 21st century here? This
Just
only
a-
had that amount of memory.
Yeah, it's like your doorbell has more memory than this. But the new V5, I think it's like 30 megabytes of user memory. Basically, don't worry about memory anymore. If you could somehow figure, without writing bad code in C, I don't know how you could fill up 30 megabytes with, oh, it's upside down. There we go. 30 megabytes with VEX programs. You can also download up to 8 programs at a time to this, so it has 8 program sockets. So those of you doing VRC competition, you know, you've got your driver code, you've got your left-hand red alliance, left-hand blue alliance, right-hand red alliance. You got all these different autonomous routines you want to store, and you can store them all in there. Hey, you're doing programming skills, store your programming skills code in there all at the same time. You never during a tournament. If you don't change your code, you don't have to download code during tournaments anymore.
Now, I would imagine that this thing has a considerably faster processor than its predecessor. Do we know anything about how fast this computer is?
Yeah, this is it's actually it's a Cortex. I believe it's a Cortex M9. I wasn't prepped for this question. It's orders of magnitude faster than the old Cortex controller. The In fact, this was called a Cortex because the chip in it is called a Cortex chip. Well, they're still using Cortex chips, but it's not the same generation. These are not your grandfather's Cortex processors anymore. So
Now the moment we've all been waiting for, perhaps turn it on.
yep, and the last tour I'm going to mention, so there's two ways to mount this. It comes with plastic flanges that you can snap onto the side, which is similar to what the Cortex controller had, right? You now have flanges on the bottom, you can bolt it in. But the interesting thing that I like is on the bottom it has 4 screw holes that are 832 screws, the same as a VEX screw, standard VEX screw holes, so you can just bolt this on the frame of your robot. You don't have to use the plastic clips. And sometimes it'll save you some space by not having those big clips standing out. Yeah, so let's power this thing up and see if we can get the screen to do something interesting here. So I have a battery. I have a battery cable. I've checked my battery and it has electricity in it. So we're now going to plug this brain in.
Wow, look at that.
Look at that, and she's all booted up. You can see it. You can see it on here. So I'm sure that you're too far away to see this. We'll go through this in more detail with a video dedicated to the touchscreen. Some of the interesting things are that let's plug the radio in, for example. We're going to plug the radio in. I'm going to use port number 21 on the end here because I think that's where most people plug in the radio. So if you push devices on the touchscreen, it'll now show the devices that are plugged in. You may not be able to see it on camera, but down here in the corner, port 21 is showing a little picture of the radio. And if you want to, you can check the status of that radio by touching the radio, and it will bring up, oh, there's information about the radio. Well, the radio right now, it will give you data quality, signal strength, type of link, but since we don't currently have a controller turned on, it's not going to see it. I'm going to take a step of faith here and assume that this controller is charged, and we're going to plug the controller in to the brain. Now this is how you pair a controller with the brain. You plug a wire into the brain anywhere, you plug it into the back of the controller, and then you wait a few seconds and boom, they're linked. So now this has been linked to that. So let's do that again for those of you that know how this used to be in the Cortex world. You plug a smart cable in anywhere, you plug it in the back of the controller, and you wait for this little icon to change, and boom, it's hooked, it's paired, so it's already paired.
Smart technology is wonderful when it's done in harmony with each other, eh?
I know.
Yeah.
Let's hold hands.
All right. Now,
So I'm showing, on the radio now, you can see that signal strength is 99%, the drive type is drive plus data, and the data quality is 100%. So it's working.
now, as I have come to understand, this smart technology, including the brain, is always listening for firmware updates, isn't it? It tends to pull down the updates automatically?
Yes. Oh, sorry, hit the wrong button. This is to go back up to the higher level and see what that says. Oh, 3-wire ports, don't want those. That's our battery. So that was our 3-wire port status, showing that we don't have anything plugged in right now. This is our battery status. The battery right now is at 92%, and we're using 3.5 watts of power. This is the brain status. It's not plugged in. Oh, you know why I won't upgrade right now? I think it needs to be talking to a PC because it downloads firmware upgrades from off.
Gotcha.
So the software partners for VEX, Robot Mesh Studio, for example, our programming suite has a built-in firmware updater. So if you're using any of the Robot Mesh Studio products, it'll update the firmware. Understand other people providing coding solutions for V5 do the same thing.
Magic.
So
Awesome.
it's all built into the low-level API. And when your radio is working, you get lovely little red flashing lights.
Wow.
At this
Pretty.
Hanson, and on both sides. Look at that.
Wow. So is that basically the V5 in a nutshell?
That's the V5 in a nutshell.
Now, I think there's an important safety tip that we learned in the unpacking of our crate of V5s about
Oh yes, we have a
how
special.
not to transport your
tool for you.
V5.
So our first shipment of V5s, we got a couple hundred of them in, and on top of the stack, we found out that somebody with a forklift tried to rearrange. Yeah, and unfortunately, this crease is right where the controller sits, and we actually lost a controller because of a forklift accident. VEX does not normally ship these with pre-installed forklift accidents. So.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Rick. I learned a lot today.
And I did too.
Excellent. See you next time on robotmesh.com.
Aloha.
Aloha.